Lost media can be such a strange thing. With the rise of the internet, many people claim that anything can be found here, but multiple pieces of media have been lost to time with only small traces of their existence left behind. They can range from things we were never meant to see to begin with to things that we very much did see in the first place, it's just that nobody decided to archive it. Lost media is something I've been mildly obsessed with for years now. I've always wanted to make a video about it, I just never had the chance to until now. However, I'm gonna stray away from the more well-known topics of lost media, just because there's so much more out there than what usually gets talked about on here. So I've collected a list in no particular order of some of the more unknown pieces of lost media. And now that all the rambling's over, now it's time to get to what you actually came here for. For those of you who don't know, Herbie the Love Bug was a franchise that got its beginnings in the 1960s. The series centers around the sentient Volkswagen Beetle named Herbie. While every movie doesn't go about it the same way, the basic plot of all of them is Herbie helping his human companions get through life problems and inevitably helping them fall in love by the end. The last two entries in the franchise were a remake of The Love Bug in 1998 and a full-on sequel to the rest of the movies in 2006. However, in an indeterminate amount of time between the 1990s and the 2000s, there was another project in development. You might want to sit down for this one because it isn't exactly the easiest thing on the eyes. At some point in between the 1990s and the 2000s, the animators of JJ the Jet Plane decided to try their hand at pitching a pilot for a Herbie series to the Disney Channel. Not much is known about it outside of the images on Modern Cartoons' website from around the time. It's unknown whether there was an actual pilot produced or if these are the only images of the series that were created. These images are uncanny to say the least, not just because of Herbie's design, but the environments themselves are bizarre for a Herbie series. But Herbie's design does not make things any better. While this isn't the first time they've attempted to give Herbie more of a face, considering how posters back in the day used to do that a lot, they just never leaned this far into the realism effect, so he never really bled too much into the uncanny valley. He looks less like a sentient car here and more like a human that's been fused into a car. But considering that these are the same people who made JJ the Jet Plane, I shouldn't be too surprised by that. While information on this show is pretty scarce, with what is out there, I think it's safe to say we dodged a pretty fat bullet. Spider-Man as a character in a franchise needs no introduction, but what probably does is the large amounts of fan films and independent movies based around the character that come from before the age of the internet. Surprisingly enough, fan films around the character date as far back as 1969. While most of them have been archived on the internet for all to see, there remains one that still is very difficult to get a hold of. That one is Spider-Man vs. Kraven the Hunter. Bruce Cardozo came up with the idea in his experimental film class. He wanted to make a 30-minute full-color, semi-professional, and comic book accurate adaptation of one of the Amazing Spider-Man comics. Even though his classmates believed that due to the limitations of the time it would be impossible, Cardozo still went through with it. His goal was to make it so perfect and accurate that audiences would really feel like the characters had jumped from the pages and onto the screen. We don't have any photos from the movie, but it's said that Spider-Man's costume was heavily inspired by Steve Ditko's design. Keeping in line with the story that was being adapted, Spider-Man also makes use of his spider signal, which along with all the other graphics in the movie were made by Richard Eberhard. The web-slinging scene sounds like they would have been fairly impressive for the time, considering that instead of just using static backdrops for them, they'd instead use traveling matte shots of New York, like a neon-lit Times Square. They even built large sections of buildings in order to have scenes of Spider-Man climbing up and down walls. It sounds like a lot of hard work and effort went into this movie, and it seems like it would have paid off, but not many people have gotten to see it. While Cardozo considered finding a way to distribute the film, he ultimately decided against it, instead opting to just show it at screenings at conventions. In 2004, Dan Poole, a director of another independent Spider-Man film, asked Cardozo if he could send him the film over email. Cardozo refused because he didn't want to show anybody the film over the internet, but he was happy to show him a private screening of the film. Cardozo never went back on this rule, and with his passing in 2015, it's unknown whether the movie will ever be made available to the general public. It's kinda sad considering all the hard work and dedication that obviously went into it. Also, it'd be kinda funny to see a Spider-Man with a thick New York accent. The Looney Tunes don't need an introduction, so I'll just cut straight to the point on this one. In 1968, 78 Looney Tunes shorts were sent to South Korea to be redrawn in color for use on television. Many would say that these were poorly done, so near the end of the 80s, Warner Brothers decided to recolorize them using computer coloration. By the end of the 90s, every short that was redrawn in South Korea was recolorized, with an additional 24 more shorts with newly colorized versions. These shorts were aired on Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network throughout the 90s and 2000s, and still occasionally air on Boomerang today. However, there are a few shorts that still have their redrawn versions aired instead of their computer colorized versions. This initially led to all those shorts being lost. However, some of them have been found over time. Some of them can be found on 2 officially released Looney Tunes VHS tapes, and one of them can be found on an unofficial DVD of The Fighting 69th. While there are still some shorts that are lost, there is a Discord server that's dedicated specifically to searching for them. And since Warner Brothers themselves created these shorts, there isn't a doubt in my mind that they have them in their archive somewhere. At the moment though, the best bet would probably be trying to find more obscure home media releases that happen to use the computer colorized versions instead of redrawn ones. Space Ghost Coast to Coast is the earliest Adult Swim show to ever exist, premiering before even The Block did. The show was the first to reuse Hanna-Barbera assets to create an entirely new show, that shows like C-Lab 2021 and The Brak Show would also do years later, turning the action cartoon simply named Space Ghost into a talk show where he interviews random celebrities. The show was extremely popular, with even Eric Andre saying that it was a big inspiration while making his own Adult Swim show. And even after the show ended, up until about 2012, we would still occasionally see Space Ghost interviews be created. However, unknown to most people, there were 2 pilots produced before the series that are both partially lost. The first pilot was an interview with Denzel Washington. However, instead of him actually being there, they used archival footage to make it look like he was interacting with Space Ghost. That archival footage is the exact reason why it's remained partially lost this whole time. The footage would have cost $25,000 to license, so instead of doing that, they simply released bits and pieces of the pilot that had nothing to do with Denzel Washington. The second pilot was an interview with Emma Thompson, and it hasn't been officially released in any form. All that's publicly available of this pilot are just a few clips and images. Space Ghost also has a different voice actor for each individual pilot and for the full series. In the first pilot, he's voiced by Andy Merrill, who was also the voice of Brak in the show.
Hello everybody, I'm Space Ghost. You're welcome to my show. I'm Space Ghost, and this has been my show. Thanks for watching. Join us next time and we'll have Don Knotts. I don't feel too good.
In the second pilot, he was voiced by Gary Owens, who was actually the original voice actor for Space Ghost in the classic series.
Dear Space Ghost, the other kids in school don't understand me, and the really big kids beat me up all the time. Will you come destroy them? Your friend, Billy Shannon, Newark, Ohio. P.S. I love your show. Well, Billy, you really need to talk to your teacher or your parents about all of this. If that doesn't work, call me, and I'll at least come and stun them real bad.
Merrill's voice is kind of weird and doesn't fit Space Ghost that much, but Owens actually sounds really good, and it confuses me why they replaced him for the full series. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing though, because George Lois' Space Ghost is still iconic. While there isn't much footage out there, there is full transcripts for both of them on the internet. I'll put a link in the description so that you guys can go read them yourselves. Well, that's all the pieces of lost media I had queued up for this video. If you enjoyed it, I do plan on making more of these. They just probably won't be as frequent as the Bomberman videos. Mostly because just like how I always want to make lost media videos, there's also a lot of other genres of videos that I've always wanted to make. Even though I do have a few more pieces of lost media in mind for when I make another one of these, I am open to requests. If there's a piece of lost media you'd like to see me talk about, throw it in the comments, and I'll happily throw it onto the list. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you niggas next time.